When the whole world bowed before Hitler's power, one German soldier quietly refused. Armed with nothing but a wooden gun, Franz Hasel marched into war, determined never to shed blood, never to work on God's holy day, and never to betray his faith. Yet against every human prediction, God preserved him through every battle. This is his story. Who was Franz Hasel, this humble man who defied an empire? To answer that, we journey back to a peaceful German village before the storm. In the early 1930s, Franz and his wife Helene lived a simple, contented life with their children. They tended a little garden, shared meals at a wooden table, and spent quiet evenings by lamplight. Each Friday at sunset, they welcomed the Sabbath with hymns and heartfelt prayer. Their small home glowed with love and faith. The Hasels were devout Christians who believed deeply in all of God's commandments. They taught their children kindness and honesty. They helped neighbors in need. And every Saturday, they rested from work, honoring the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. Exodus 28. This faith wasn't just a routine. It was their refuge and guide. Their faith was not just a set of beliefs, but a source of strength and guidance. It gave them courage to do right and compassion for others, no matter what. But outside their village, dark clouds gathered. Adolf Hitler rose to power, and the fabric of German society began to change. Nazi flags fluttered on every street. The radio carried the harsh voice of Hitler demanding loyalty and war. Neighbors whispered in fear as Jewish families disappeared from their shops and homes. The new regime wanted to control every aspect of life, telling people how to think, whom to hate, and even when to work and worship. Those who dared to follow their own conscience were seen as enemies. Franz and Helene watched with heavy hearts as their country bowed to this tyranny. Yet amid this swelling storm, the Hasel family remained steadfast. They clung to God's values of peace and charity, even as cruelty and lies became the norm around them.
We must show love, not hate.
Helene would gently remind the children as they knelt for evening prayer.
We will trust God, whatever comes.
Still, every passing month of the 1930s brought the Hasels closer to a great test. Franz, a skilled carpenter by trade, heard rumors that all able-bodied men might soon be called to serve in the army. At night, he lay awake beside Helene, wondering what he would do. Franz's deep-seated belief in the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," Exodus 20:13, stood in direct conflict with the Nazi demand for soldiers. How could he, a Christian who vowed never to take a life, put on the uniform of a regime built on violence? The very thought felt like a betrayal of his Lord. But if he refused to serve, he would be torn from his family and likely executed as a traitor. Franz was a gentle father and devoted husband. Protecting his family was his duty, yet obeying God was his highest calling. He prayed fervently for guidance as storm clouds of war loomed on the horizon. Their faith and values would be repeatedly tested as war loomed closer each day. For a time, life went on normally. Franz continued building furniture and houses, whistling hymns as he worked with wood. Helene baked bread and tucked the children into bed with Bible promises. They found moments of peace in their close-knit church community. But everyone knew a conflict was coming, one that would engulf the world. And one day, it did. The whisper of war became a roar and Germany marched to battle. The Hasel season of calm was about to end. They had weathered the early winds of change with faith and integrity. But now the full storm was about to break upon them. How would this gentle family face the fury of World War II? The answer would require every ounce of courage God could give. September 1939. War breaks out like a thunderclap, shattering the quiet of the Hasels' home. Franz stands at his doorstep, trembling paper in hand, a draft notice ordering him to report for military duty. In that instant, the world seems to spin. Helene's face goes pale. The children, sensing distress, cling to their mother's skirts. War has reached into their happy home and claimed Franz for Hitler's army. The night before Franz must leave, the family gathers in the little parlor. The blackout curtains are drawn tight, faint lantern light flickers on their faces. They kneel together on the threadbare rug. Helene's voice breaks as she prays,
Dear God, give us strength. Please watch over Franz on the battlefield and keep the children and me faithful at home.
Franz holds his wife's hand and adds his own prayer in a whisper.
Lord, I am in your hands. Come what may, help me to be true.
Tears wet their cheeks, but a divine peace warms their hearts. They recall God's promise, and the angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him and delivereth them. Psalm 34:7. In that sacred moment, they choose trust over fear. At dawn, Franz dons the field gray uniform of the Wehrmacht. Helene adjusts the collar gently, fighting back tears. He carries a small Bible tucked in his coat as his true weapon of war. The children do not fully grasp what is happening. They only know Papa is leaving, little else can be said. At the train station, Franz embraces each child and then wraps Helene in his arms.
Every evening when the sun sets, we will pray for you until you come home.
Helene whispers.
God will be with you wherever you go.
Franz nods, swallowing the lump in his throat.
I will think of you every Sabbath,
He replies softly.
and I will remember what we read. We ought to obey God rather than men.
With one last look at his family, committing them to God's care, he boards the train. Steam billows, the engine groans, and with a jolt, the train carries Franz away into the unknown. Helene stands on the platform, one hand raised in farewell and the other clutching a worn Bible. As the train disappears, she whispers through tears,
Lord, keep him faithful and bring him back to us.
Franz's new reality is the German army, a world utterly at odds with his gentle spirit. He is sent to a training camp where barking officers demand absolute obedience. Guns rattle in drills, boots stomp in unison. From the first day, Franz stands apart. In barracks filled with cursing and cruel talk, he kneels by his cot to pray silently. When other soldiers boast of Nazi slogans, Franz remains quiet or speaks of his hope that the war will soon end. His comrades notice he won't eat the pork stew in the mess hall, and he slips away each night to read his pocket Bible under a blanket. Some sneer or whisper that he's a coward or a holy man. The pressure to conform is intense. Every order Franz receives, crawl under barbed wire, shoot that target, swear allegiance to Hitler, crashes against the wall of his conscience. The German army's expectation of blind obedience and violence is in direct conflict with Franz's faith, which champions peace and compassion. He resolves in his heart, I will serve, but I will not kill. I will wear this uniform, but I will never betray my God. From the very start, Franz looks for ways to obey the letter of his orders without violating God's law. He remembers his skill as a carpenter and volunteers for tasks that use those skills. Building barracks, fixing officers' quarters, anything to avoid picking up a rifle against another man. When shooting practice is unavoidable, Franz comes up with a daring plan. Late one night, by the light of a small lamp, he carves a piece of wood into the shape of a rifle. The next day on the drill field, he swaps the real rifle for his handmade wooden gun. From a distance, he looks armed like everyone else, but Franz has no intention of ever taking a life. This secret act of defiance allows him to appear compliant while staying true to the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." It's a clever ruse and a dangerous one. If an officer notices the dull wood instead of metal, Franz could be executed on the spot. Such actions are perilous. Discovery of his deception could mean severe punishment or even death. But God grants him favor. Day after day, drill after drill, no one notices the humble carpenter carrying a wooden gun among the heavily armed soldiers. 1,000 rifles around him, and his holds not a single bullet. Back home, Helene faces her own battles. War's outbreak has turned her world upside down, too. She must keep the household running alone under new hardships. Food is strictly rationed. Some days she skips meals so the children can eat. At night, the sky glows an eerie red as Allied planes drop bombs on nearby cities. And she huddles with the little ones in a dark cellar, singing hymns to calm their fears over the thunder of distant explosions. The Nazi authorities grow bolder in persecuting those who don't fall in line. Because the Hasels worship on Saturday and refuse to join Nazi organizations, suspicion shadows them. Helene learns to answer the door with a steady voice, even if her heart pounds, in case an official comes to question their loyalties. Despite everything, she teaches the children to pray for their enemies and trust God's protection. Prayer becomes their daily ritual, a source of comfort and a reminder of their guiding principles. As the war rages on, each member of the Hasel family sacrifices and suffers. Yet through the tears and terror, they refuse to let go of the moral truths that define them. Their life becomes a delicate balance, outwardly complying with harsh laws when they must, but quietly resisting evil whenever they can. In letters home, Franz encourages Helene to keep the faith. In her replies, Helene writes of God's provision, how a kind neighbor shared extra potatoes or how the Lord protected them during an air raid. Both know they must walk carefully, like on a narrow path along a cliff. But that narrow path is lit by God's word, and they will follow it come what may. War has engulfed the Hasel family, testing their beliefs at every turn. Franz has been thrust into the belly of the beast, determined to serve without sinning. Helene holds the home together, under the constant threat of danger. They have survived the war's beginning by clinging to God and to each other. But the greatest trials are yet to come. Franz Hasel is now a reluctant soldier in Hitler's Wehrmacht, but in his heart he remains a servant of Christ. Surrounded by the brutality of war, he holds on to faith as his lifeline. Each morning in the barracks, before the bugle sounds, Franz slips out of his bunk to kneel on the cold wooden floor. In whispers he recites the 91st Psalm, remembering God's promise of protection. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand. But it shall not come nigh thee. Psalm 91, verse 7. These words give him courage to face another day in uniform. While other soldiers polish their rifles, Franz silently prays over his wooden decoy gun, asking God to use even this small act for good. He knows he walks a razor's edge. Every step must be guided by prayer and principle. Early on, Franz's superiors notice something different about him. He does his duties diligently, scrubbing floors, peeling potatoes, building supply crates. And he rarely complains. During drills, Franz moves with the others. He lifts his rifle like them, but it's made of wood. He pretends to aim, careful not to stand out. Every motion hides his secret. He will not kill. He's careful not to draw too much attention, but rumors start to spread. Hasel hesitates. Some whisper, he's too soft. One sweltering summer Saturday, an officer orders Franz to work on a special project. Respectfully, Franz replies,
Sir, today is my day of rest. I cannot work today.
The officer's face turns red with anger. For a moment, Franz expects to be struck or worse, but instead the officer snorts, Fine. Have it your way, church boy. You can dig double trenches tomorrow. Franz bows his head in gratitude. God has honored his stand for the Sabbath once again. At every turn, Franz ingeniously finds ways to maintain his principles. He volunteers for night watches and extra Sunday shifts so that his commanders will allow him a few hours on Saturdays to quietly pray and read his Bible. Sometimes other soldiers mock him, and a few call him crazy preacher. But a couple of kind-hearted fellows admire Franz's unwavering integrity and cover for him when they can. In secret, they even agree to switch duties. One friend takes Franz's turn on Saturday, and in exchange, Franz takes that friend's unwanted midnight guard duty. Such kindness is rare in the harsh military life, and Franz thanks God for these small mercies. Even so, danger is never far. Franz's refusal to fully join the Nazi fervor makes some of his superiors suspicious. One night he finds a note on his cot, "We're watching you." He doesn't know who left it, but he understands the warning. If he's caught undermining the war effort or disobeying orders, he could be court-martialed and executed. That night, Franz opens his Bible to the book of Daniel. By a dim lantern, he reads about Daniel praying to God despite the king's decree, and about Daniel's friends who refused to bow to an idol. A smile touches Franz's lips. Those men of old faced a fiery furnace for obeying God, yet God stood with them. Franz closes his eyes and breathes a prayer.
Lord, give me the courage of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Help me stand for you, even if I stand alone.
Outside, the wind howls and the sounds of distant artillery echo through the night. But in Franz's corner of the barracks there is a sacred stillness. Heaven feels near. Through countless small choices, Franz remains steadfast in his convictions. He won't salute the swastika flag with the same zeal as others, though he does just enough to avoid immediate punishment. When ordered to curse or shout hateful slogans, he moves his lips silently in prayer instead. Word of Franz's unusual behavior eventually reached his commanding officer. The reports were troubling. He prayed instead of drinking, avoided work on Saturdays, and never seemed eager to handle his rifle. One evening, Franz was ordered to report to the officer's quarters. As he entered, he silently prayed for wisdom. The officer looked up sharply. "Hasel," he began, "I've been told you refuse to shoot. Is that true?" Franz stood straight. "Sir, I am willing to serve faithfully in any way I can, but my conscience does not allow me to take a life." The officer frowned. "You understand that disobedience in wartime can mean death?" "Yes, sir," Franz replied quietly, "but I must obey God first." The officer studied him for a long moment, clearly unsure what to make of such a man. "Then what use are you to me if you won't fight?" he demanded. Franz answered respectfully, "I am a carpenter, sir. I can build, repair, and serve my country without harming anyone." The officer leaned back, silent for several seconds, then finally said, "Very well. You'll be assigned to construction duties. But if you ever refuse a direct order, the consequences will be severe." Franz nodded. "I understand." The officer dismissed him with a curt gesture. "See that you do." As Franz stepped out into the cold air, his knees felt weak, yet his heart was steady. He knew he had come dangerously close to death, but God had given him words and courage. He whispered a prayer of gratitude, aware that from that moment on, every day in uniform would be a test of faith and obedience to heaven, rather than men. This new role keeps Franz slightly further from direct combat. It's grueling work in mud and cold rivers, but it spares him from carrying a rifle in battle most days. Franz made use of his training as a carpenter, volunteering for assignments that kept him away from the front lines, giving him a degree of moral separation from the violence. To Franz, this feels like an answered prayer. Hammering planks and driving nails, he hums hymns under his breath. Each board he saws and each nail he pounds is an act of worship, a way to serve without killing. Some nights, as he bandages his blistered hands by the campfire, Franz reflects on how God has led him. He marvels that he's survived battles unscathed and that so far he hasn't violated his conscience. He writes to Helene, carefully choosing his words, since letters are censored. "I am doing well and God is ever beside me." I remember his promise that he is able to keep us from falling, Jude 24. "Continue to pray for me as I pray for you." Helene's reply arrives weeks later. "The Lord is faithful. We pray each day that you remain under his wings. Remember, no matter how fierce the battle, you are never alone." These tender words renew Franz's strength. Through it all, one thought shines in Franz's mind. We ought to obey God rather than men. It is more than a Bible verse to him now. It is his daily reality. While others around him commit atrocities in blind obedience to Hitler, Franz quietly obeys a higher commander. His fellow soldiers may not understand, but a few notice that wherever Franz goes, a little bit of goodness follows. He shares his rations with a hungry comrade. He offers a wounded enemy a drink of water when no one is looking. On Sabbath mornings, he finds a reason to slip away and read a few verses of scripture under a tree. Once, a curious soldier asks, "Why are you so different, Hasel? Why won't you just do as you're told?" Franz smiles gently and asks in return, "Would you do anything you're told, even if you knew it was wrong?" The soldier falls silent. In the distance, artillery booms like thunder. Franz gazes up at a gray, war-torn sky and adds softly, "I answer to God before any man." Franz's faith has carried him this far through the war, guiding each decision in the belly of Hitler's army. But what about those he left behind? While Franz lives out his convictions in the field, another battle of faith is being waged in his own home. While Franz faces gunfire and moral trials in distant lands back on the home front, his wife Helene is fighting a quiet war of her own. Each day, she wakes before dawn to the cry of her youngest and the cold realization that Franz is still gone. She steels herself for another day of uncertainty and hardship. The absence of Franz places an enormous emotional and physical burden on Helene, yet she navigates these dire circumstances with remarkable strength. Helene's first battle is simply to survive and keep the children safe. Food grows scarcer with each passing month of war. She stands in long lines for a loaf of bread, often returning home empty-handed. Ever resourceful, Helene turns their little yard into a vegetable garden. The children help her dig and plant potatoes and carrots. It's meager, but it keeps them from starving. When winter arrives, fuel is rationed. Late at night, after the children are asleep, Helene quietly chops broken furniture into firewood. She pulls on Franz's old coat for warmth and whispers a prayer with each swing of the axe. "Lord, give me strength." Her muscles ache, but she's determined that her family will not freeze. In the flickering candlelight, Helene reads bedtime Bible stories to the children. Huddled under quilts, they listen wide-eyed as she tells of Daniel protected in the lion's den and of Jesus calming the stormy sea. These stories of deliverance nourish their faith and hers. Often the family pauses to pray for Papa. Little Susie prays in her small voice, "Dear Jesus, please help Papa not to be afraid." Helene blinks back tears and adds, "Yes, Lord, be his shield and our shield too." In these tender moments, their home, though battered by war, becomes a sanctuary of hope. But Helene's battle is not just for her own family's survival. She also feels called to quietly resist the evil around her. The Nazi regime inflicts suffering on many, especially Jews and other minorities. Helene hears whispers in church about neighbors disappearing and families in hiding. Remembering Jesus' command to love your neighbor, she decides she must act. Late one night, there's a soft knock at Helene's door. Outside in the darkness stands a desperate Jewish mother with a young boy trembling with cold. Without hesitation, Helene ushers them inside. She offers a warm bowl of broth and a place by the stove. The mother's eyes fill with grateful tears. Helene knows the risk she's taking. If caught sheltering Jews, she and her children could be executed, but her conscience will not let her turn them away. She recalls the words of Scripture, "Hide the outcasts, bewray not him that wandereth." Isaiah 16:3. For 1 week, Helene hides the mother and son in her cellar, teaching her own children to be very quiet about their special guests. When arrangements are made for the pair to be smuggled to a safer area, Helene gives the mother a tight embrace and her last loaf of bread. "God be with you," she whispers as they depart before dawn. Helene and others in their small church community provide aid to persecuted individuals whenever possible, acts of compassion that often involve great personal risk. These humble deeds of mercy, done in secret, are her acts of defiance against Hitler's cruelty. The church itself becomes a lifeline for Helene and the children. Despite Nazi efforts to stamp out independent religious gatherings, the Hasels as fellow believers find ways to meet and encourage one another. Sometimes on Sabbath, a few families slip into each other's homes in ones and twos to avoid drawing attention. There, behind drawn curtains, they sing hymns softly so as not to be heard on the street. Helene sings along, her voice quavering but full of conviction. "A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark, never failing." The words comfort her soul. The group prays for all their loved ones at the front, naming each soldier one by one. They also pray for courage to do what's right in a world gone wrong. It is in these clandestine worship meetings that Helene feels her strength renewed. She's reminded that she's not alone. Others share her convictions. This little church community serves as a bastion of support and resilience. Members share whatever they can spare: a bit of sugar, a bar of soap, a few eggs from a backyard hen. They share news carefully as well. One friend quietly informs Helene which officials to avoid in town, and another slips her a note when a roundup of suspected traitors is happening, so she can lay low. These bonds of fellowship fortify Helene's resolve to endure. Together they are like candles in a blackout. Individually small, but together they push back the darkness. Helene's children witness their mother's quiet heroism daily. They see her bow her head and forgive when a Nazi neighbor screams at her for not attending a Hitler rally. They watch her give away their only spare blanket to an elderly widow down the road who lost her home in a bombing. When they ask why, Helene smiles gently and says, "We help others because Jesus loves them too." We must never let this war make us lose our kindness. In a time when fear and hatred are the norm, Helene teaches her children by example that courage can be gentle and love can be daring. Many nights she stays up late mending their worn clothes by candlelight. Exhausted, she sometimes feels on the brink of despair. In those moments, she recalls a favorite promise. "I have been young and now am old, yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread." Psalm 37:25. God has provided for them so far. She takes a deep breath and carries on. Throughout this period, Helene's dedication to her faith and family never wavers. Her ability to keep the household intact and instill hope amid pervasive desolation is nothing short of remarkable. Truly, on this home front, hers is a different kind of valor. A steadfast, patient heroism that quietly defeats despair day by day. As the war stretches into its later years, Franz Hasel's quiet resistance hardens into deliberate acts of defiance against Hitler's war machine. By now, Franz has seen more than enough of the Nazi regime's cruelty. He has marched through villages reduced to ashes. He has heard the cries of the innocent. His heart aches at the suffering around him. In his prayers, one question burns: what more can I do to save lives without taking life? In the stillness of one night, the answer comes clearly to his mind. There is a stash of ammunition in a bunker where Franz and a few trusted friends work. Those bullets are meant to tear through flesh and end lives. What if they never worked? The next evening, Franz quietly approaches one of his comrades, a fellow Christian soldier who also despises the killing. Under the cover of darkness, they slip into the ammunition depot. Working by feel and with whispered prayers, Franz deftly removes the firing pins and dampens the gunpowder in numerous rifle cartridges and shells. It's painstaking work. One mistake and an explosion could kill them both. Sweat beads on Franz's forehead despite the cold. He handles each bullet gently, thinking of the lives it won't take if he succeeds. By the time they finish, dozens of rounds have been rendered useless. In a few days, these sabotaged munitions will be shipped to the front. When soldiers attempt to fire them, they will jam or misfire harmlessly. Franz's deliberate sabotage of ammunition is one of his most profound acts of defiance. He knows it could save countless lives on both sides. He also knows that if anyone discovers what he's done, execution would be the immediate punishment. Yet in that dark bunker, as he and his friend replace the crates, Franz feels a strange calm. He remembers a verse, perhaps one he and Helene discussed long ago. "Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin." James 4:17. By that standard, he is simply doing what is right, come what may. As they slip back to their barracks, the friend whispers, "God be with us." Franz nods. In his heart, he senses God's smile. Not long after, an opportunity arises for an even bolder act of compassion. During a brutal winter, Franz's unit is stationed near a ghetto where Jewish families have been imprisoned by the SS. The soldiers are forbidden to have any contact, but Franz's work detail takes him close to the ghetto fence at times. One frigid evening, he spots a thin, shivering figure just beyond the wire. An older man gazing at him with hollow eyes. The man's family huddles behind him. Franz's breath catches. They remind him of his own family. He cannot ignore them. Risking everything, Franz pretends to inspect the fence while subtly moving close. In Low German, he murmurs, "Tomorrow at midnight, be ready. God will make a way." The man's eyes widen with a glint of desperate hope. That night, Franz prays fervently and hatches a plan. Using scraps and ink, he forges a travel permit and identification papers for the family, listing them as German citizens. The following night, under a moonless sky, he returns to the fence and slips the documents and a small bundle of food through a loose plank. Quietly, he instructs the man on a safe route out of the area, warning which roads to avoid. The Jewish father has tears streaming down his face as he mouths, "Danke, thank you." Franz places a finger to his lips and then points upward, indicating it is God they should thank. The family silently disappears into the darkness, clutching the papers that may well be their salvation. These gestures of humanity, providing vital information, food, and forged papers to help persecuted Jews escape, are Franz's way of pushing back against the dehumanizing policies of the regime. He has to maintain the facade of a loyal soldier by day, but by night his true allegiance is to heaven's principles of mercy. Each small rebellion, each bullet rendered useless, each life quietly saved, lifts Franz's spirit. But they also weigh on him, because the danger grows with every act. He lives a double life, and the strain is immense. At any moment, a single suspicious colleague or an unexpected inspection could unravel everything. More than once, Franz wakes in the middle of the night, heart pounding, thinking he heard the click of a pistol being cocked near his head. The fear of discovery is his constant companion. One gray dawn, a fellow soldier abruptly asks him, "Franz, were you in the supply depot last night? Thought I saw someone." Franz calmly replied that he had only done the work he was assigned to do. The soldier shrugs and wanders off, and Franz exhales a shaky breath, silently thanking God. The psychological burden of living under such suspicion is profound. Franz endures sleepless nights and walks around with a knot of tension between his shoulders. But when these fears threaten to overwhelm him, he steels himself with prayer. Often he recalls the promise of Jesus, "I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee." Hebrews 13:5. It gives him courage to carry on with his quiet rebellion one more day. In this dark setting of war, even minor acts of goodness shine brightly. Franz doesn't see himself as a hero. He thinks he's only doing what any Christian should do. But to those he helps, he is a guardian angel in uniform. A comrade who secretly shares Franz's faith confides, "Your example keeps me going. If you can be true to God here, then so can I." This small encouragement bolsters Franz's resolve. He realizes that his stand is inspiring others to hold on to their humanity amid the madness. Truly, courage isn't always loud. Often it is the quiet, steadfast commitment to one's values that speaks the loudest. Franz's integrity, though not trumpeted with fanfare, echoes in the hearts of those around him. In the dead of one winter's night, Franz and two like-minded soldiers gather briefly behind a shed to pray. They pray not for victory in battle, but for God's will to be done, for mercy on innocent lives, and for their families back home. Under the silent snow, these few form a tiny, clandestine network of conscience. They agree to watch out for each other and share any information that could save lives. Bound by a common belief in the sanctity of life, these men support one another, reinforcing the inner resolve needed to maintain their defiance. Knowing he is not entirely alone in his convictions gives Franz new strength. With each passing month, Franz's acts of defiance grow bolder as opportunities arise, yet he remains careful and prayerful. He saves extra bread rations to slip to starving civilians. He deliberately loses a crate of grenades in a river while transporting supplies. Whenever he can slow the Nazi war machine without being caught, he does so. And each time, he prays that these small sabotages and kindnesses will tip the scales towards life, even if only a little. He thinks often of Helene and the children. Are they safe? He writes coded hints in his letters to let Helene know he is still keeping the faith. In one letter he says, "Tell the children that even in a lion's den, God can shut the lions' mouths." Daniel 6. I feel his protection daily. Helene reads these lines by candlelight and smiles through tears, understanding that Franz is telling her he remains unharmed and true to his beliefs. How proud she would be if she knew the full extent of his bravery. As the war roars toward its climax, the noose tightens around any dissenters within the German ranks. Franz has survived by God's grace so far, but will his quiet crusade be discovered? The Third Reich is beginning to crumble under Allied attack, and in its desperation, it may lash out at its own. Franz has one more battle to endure, the final chaotic months of World War II. In the spring of 1945, the Second World War grinds to an agonizing close. The once mighty Nazi war machine is disintegrating. From east and west, Allied forces push into Germany, and the end of the war is at hand. Franz's unit, battered and leaderless, finds itself in chaos. The chain of command is broken as officers flee or surrender. Bombs fall relentlessly, turning cities into oceans of rubble. Through this turmoil, Franz clings to one hope, somehow by God's grace to survive and return to his beloved Helene and children. The final days of the war are among the most dangerous for Franz. With defeat imminent, some fanatical Nazi officers issue brutal orders. No surrender. Fight to the last man. There are even whispers that anyone refusing to fight should be executed as a traitor. Franz prays for wisdom. Amid an artillery bombardment, his unit is ordered to make a hopeless stand. Franz realizes this could be a senseless slaughter. He remembers God's promise in the Psalms and takes a bold risk. He urges a few nearby comrades, including his praying friends, to fall back with him to a safer position in the woods. This fight is lost, he tells them over the din of explosions. We can do more good helping the wounded than throwing our lives away. Remarkably, in the pandemonium, they are able to pull back without notice. Hidden in the forest, they tend to 2 injured young soldiers through the night, likely saving their lives. By morning, they discover that their original post was shelled to oblivion. Many who stayed behind perished. Franz bows his head, heartsick for those lost yet grateful for God's guidance that spared them. It is as though an unseen hand directed his steps. Truly, thousands fell around him, but it did not come nigh him. And then, almost suddenly, it is over. The guns fall silent. Germany surrenders. World War II has ended. Franz can hardly believe it. He kneels on the war-torn road and whispers, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you." But his journey is far from over. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigns. German soldiers are being rounded up as prisoners by the Allied armies. Franz faces a new danger, capture by the Soviet forces advancing from the east, who are enraged by the destruction Germany caused. To fall into their hands could mean a harsh captivity or worse. So Franz makes a decision. Along with a few companions, he slips away under cover of night, beginning a long and perilous trek westward toward home. He wears an old coat over his uniform to avoid attention. The landscape he traverses is almost unrecognizable. Whole towns have been flattened. Roads are clogged with refugees, men, women, and children dragging carts of meager possessions, all searching for missing loved ones or a safe place to sleep. Franz shares what little food he has with hungry strangers along the way, even as his own stomach growls. He walks for days, dodging checkpoints and sleeping in barns or under hedges. His feet bleed and his body is weak from months of poor rations, but he presses on, fueled by the vision of home. At one point, he narrowly avoids a Soviet patrol by hiding in a ditch, reciting Psalm 23 under his breath. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Psalm 23:4. That promise has never felt more real. After weeks of travel, one golden afternoon, Franz finally approaches his village. The war has left its scars here too, a burned-out barn, shattered windows. His heart pounds as he turns onto the familiar lane leading to his house. Will his family be there? Are they even alive? He quickens his pace despite exhaustion. Then through the garden gate he sees them. Helene hanging laundry on the line with little Susie helping, and the older children chasing a chicken. They look thin and a bit older, but alive. Franz's throat tightens. He calls out, "Helene!" At the sound of his voice, Helene freezes, hardly daring to believe her ears. She spins around and beholds a gaunt, bearded figure in a tattered uniform standing at the gate. But she would know him anywhere. With a cry, she runs toward him, tears streaming down her face. The children race behind her, shouting, "Papa! Papa!" In an instant, Franz is surrounded by the warm, fierce embraces of his wife and kids. He drops to his knees to be eye level with them. There are no words, only sobs of joy and gratitude. In that sacred moment, the horrors of war seem to melt away. The family is whole again. That evening, under the soft glow of lamplight, the Hasels gather for worship just as they did in peacetime. But now their prayers are filled with profound thanksgiving. They know that against all odds, God kept them. Helene recounts how she prayed every day and how God provided for them, sending helpful neighbors, keeping them safe during bombings, and giving her strength to carry on. Franz listens, holding her hand, marveling at her courage. In turn, he shares as much of his story as he can, filtering it for young ears. He tells how God protected him in battle after battle, how friends and even enemies helped him along the way. He does not boast of his secret defiance, but Helene senses that her husband did much good in a very evil time. She softly says, "1,000 fell at your side, Franz, but God did not let any harm come to you." They both know it's true. Psalm 91 has been fulfilled in his life. That night, Franz leads the family in a hymn they all know well. "God be with you till we meet again." They had sung it in parting. Now they sing it in reunion. Helene's alto and Franz's tenor mingle with the sweet voices of the children as they lift the song into the night air. It is less a performance than a prayer of thanks. In the weeks that follow, Franz and Helene set about rebuilding their lives. Germany is in ruins. The economy has collapsed. But they have something more precious than material wealth. They have faith, family, and freedom of conscience. They return to their church community, embracing friends who also endured the war. Together they clean up the damaged little church building and hammer new boards where windows once were. On Sabbath mornings, they fill the house of worship with songs of praise, despite the holes in the roof and the cold wind blowing through. Their very presence is a testimony. The Hasels leaned on their faith community, drawing solace from shared experiences and mutual support. They encourage their neighbors to forgive and rebuild. When bitter memories surface, like the loss of a relative or the injustices suffered, Franz gently reminds them, we must leave judgment to God and focus on what we can do now. Love each other and those in need. Helene, by example, seeks out widows and orphans to help, just as she did during the war. The couple's strong bond and shared values guide their family through the post-war era. They emphasize to their children the importance of forgiveness, resilience, and integrity. They hope no generation to come will ever have to face such a trial. But if they do, they want their children prepared to stand for what is right. Franz often says to them during evening worship, "Never forget how God led us through." His truth is worth any sacrifice. Always do what is right, even if you stand alone. The children nod solemnly, soaking in these lessons purchased at such a price. Franz and Helene also privately grapple with healing from what they have seen and done. Franz sometimes awakens at night from nightmares of battle, his body tensing until Helene's calm voice soothes him. "It's all right, my love. You're home now." In those moments, Franz prays silently for the grace to truly forgive even those who were his enemies. He thinks of the Jewish family he helped and wonders if they made it to freedom. He thinks of the bullets he sabotaged and prays that somewhere some mothers were spared the loss of their sons because those bullets failed. Helene has her own scars, memories of hiding in cellars with frightened children, of the constant hunger and fear. Together they kneel and pour out these burdens to the Lord. Over time, the nightmares recede, replaced by a deep sense of peace. They know that the same God who preserved them can also restore them inside. Each sunrise is a gift. Each meal shared is a reminder of God's faithfulness. Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling. Helene quotes softly from Jude 24 one morning, her eyes meeting Franz's. He finishes the scripture smiling, and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. Indeed, joy now fills their modest home. The war has ended, but the story of Franz and Helene is far from over. In the aftermath of such horror, what lasting message will their lives bring to the world? The answer lies in the legacy they created, an inheritance of courage and faith that would shine for generations. In the darkest chapter of human history, they proved that a single ordinary family, guided by conscience and trust in God, can shine like a beacon of hope. The legacy of Franz and Helene's courage did not end when the war ended. It lived on in their children, in their community, and eventually in the pages of a book that would inspire thousands. Years later, their daughter, the little Susie who prayed for Papa every night, would write down the story so the world would know what her parents stood for. She wanted everyone to learn the lessons of unyielding faith and moral clarity that her family embodied. Through 1,000 Shall Fall, she shared how her father's steadfast pacifist beliefs in the face of grave danger taught her that integrity is priceless. She shared how her mother's quiet heroism showed that compassion can triumph over hate. Their narrative underscores a vital truth. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet, steadfast commitment to one's values that speaks the loudest. Franz Hasel's life stands as a poignant lesson in integrity and resilience. He not only survived the horrors of Nazi Germany, he actively resisted its evil without ever firing a fatal shot. His story emphatically declares that doing what is right, even when it's unpopular or dangerous, can have a lasting and transformative impact. Standing up for one's principles, even at great personal risk, can indeed change lives and inspire others. During the war, Franz likely never imagined that people decades later would draw strength from his example. He was simply following his conscience one day at a time. But that is precisely why his legacy is so powerful. It reminds us that the choices we make in private, the unseen acts of goodness and courage, can send ripples through history. One man's integrity in a sea of corruption became a testimony that has outlived the Third Reich itself. Helene's legacy is equally enduring. She showed that true faith is lived out in love and sacrifice. Her children and grandchildren would tell stories of how Grandma Helene hid refugees and fed the hungry during the war, how she never lost her gentle spirit even under persecution. Those stories encourage us that we too can be faithful in whatever trials we face. We might not fight in a world war, but we all face battles of conscience in our lives. The Hasel's example challenges us to be brave in those moments, to do what is right, even if we stand alone, to show kindness in a world that can be cold, and to trust God even when fear threatens to overwhelm us. In the end, it was not Hitler's might that triumphed, but God's providence in the life of one faithful man. One man's conscience, guided by heaven, became mightier than Hitler's army. And truly, 1,000 did fall, but not him. Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling. Jude 24. Amen.